listen to that. It's what I've been obsessed with, actually for several years, but a lot for the past month or so. This is Gerry Mulligan. This is king of the baritone saxophone, one of the best arrangers in the history of Western music, prolific composer, quick learner, collaborator, masterful improviser. I could go on and on. The versatility of Gerry Mulligan blows me away. His musicianship is maybe unmatched. I don't even know. But I would like to introduce this man to you today if you're not familiar with him. And if you are familiar with him, maybe we'll talk about some things you haven't heard before. This is not a biographical sketch of Gerry Mulligan. I won't hit on all of the things he did, mostly because today, when I'm talking about this man, one of my heroes, I want to talk about his small group playing. Whenever I want to improve my own improvising, I always listen to recordings of the great lyrical improvisers, and I count Gerry Mulligan as one of those. In listening to Gerry Mulligan, especially his small groups, I started to notice something, and it was the fact that there's hardly ever a piano player or guitar player, any kind of player who typically is in charge of the harmony or the chords playing with Gerry Mulligan. Just rarely happens. I wondered why, and so I kind of set out on a quest to figure that out, and in doing so have gained a much greater appreciation for Gerry Mulligan. Maybe you know Gerry Mulligan because of his huge part in bringing about the birth of the cool sessions right at the end of the 40s, beginning of the 50s with Miles Davis. Even before that, he was honing his skills. I found this wonderful lecture by Stanford Josephson that I'll refer to from time to time. But let's hear about Gerry Mulligan's early beginnings and why he felt compelled to do music.
It was conditioned in me from childhood to have a band, to write for bands, to play with bands. I have a feeling that no matter what era I lived in, 100 years ago or 100 years from now, I'd always be interested in orchestration. It's one of those things that's a mystery to anybody who doesn't have an ear or talent for orchestration. Why does some kid come along and know how it's done? And when I was a kid, I knew how it was done, and I wanted to do it.
He could hear like nobody's business. Gerry Mulligan could hear all of the workings of a big band. He grew up listening to Duke Ellington's music extensively, and he was kind of fascinated by the fact that Duke would write the top line for the trumpet and the bottom line for the baritone saxophone. And he heard all of these beautiful counterpoint kind of ideas, contrary motion between the two lines, and it made him think about how important that bottom end was to a band. He fell in love with the baritone saxophone, even though he grew up playing clarinet and piano. He was a man of many talents, but right out of high school, he even dropped out. He started arranging for big band. He arranged for several big bands, Gene Krupa's included, Stan Kenton later on, but it was when he started arranging for Claude Thornhill's orchestra that I think his sound and his idea of what was possible, the melding together of classical and jazz, the inner workings of the band like I was talking about, where these ideas began to form. They began to form with his friend and bandmate Gil Evans. Evans and Mulligan were roommates in those early years, and Miles Davis caught wind of what they were doing, exploring, arranging, just hiding out all day in a dark New York City apartment and just writing together all day long. The birth of the Cool Sessions may never have come together if Miles Davis hadn't happened upon Mulligan and Evans, because he's the one who finally got everybody together, set up the session dates, hired the players. He kind of made it happen and had a vision for it all. And you might not realize it, but Gerry Mulligan composed 3 of the tracks on the birth of the Cool Sessions, and he arranged 6 of them, and he played on those sessions as well. Gerry Mulligan's influence is all over the birth of the Cool. It's all over the West Coast sound. Shortly after that, Gerry Mulligan moved to the West Coast, and he got a gig playing at the Lighthouse in Hermosa Beach. Then he got another gig playing at a place in the Wilshire district of downtown LA called The Hague. Now, this place didn't have a piano, and some other groups had maybe brought in a spinet for an occasion or two, but Gerry Mulligan said, let's just try it without a piano. I'm gonna put together a group without a piano. This was the beginning of the Gerry Mulligan Quartet. Listen to Gerry Mulligan talk about why he didn't have a pianist, and it wasn't logistics of the gig venue. I think he had something broader in mind right from the beginning.
One of the things that people mention to me when they talk of the Gerry Mulligan small groups is the fact that you don't use a piano player. Why is this?
Well, of course, in the first place, you don't need a piano. For that matter, I guess you don't really need any particular instrument, but it's become a habit of thinking to have the piano in the rhythm section. And it occurred to me that the piano was being used as a crutch for the other instruments, because the piano sits and has a function where he's playing the chords all the time, and I found that a great deal of the time he was getting in my way.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not necessarily something that I recommend for all of jazz. I should start saying, piano players are out. No more pianos in jazz, right?
But you play the piano yourself.
Well, that's the other reason. You see, if with the small band, if I ever want to get a chance to play the piano, if I have a piano player there, I'd never have the heart to tell him, say, get up, I want to play now.
That's right. I said he also played piano. And actually in this same interview, you can hear Mulligan playing piano on Darn That Dream. He's great. When asked about his biggest musical influences, Gerry Mulligan lists Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, Harry Carney, the baritone player in the Duke Ellington band. And I think all of these players can be heard in his own improvising. And I also think that these early influences that almost have, Louis Armstrong for sure roots in traditional jazz. But back in those days, at the beginnings of jazz, people were often improvising at the same time as each other. And there were multiple horns in groups, and sometimes they would be improvising lines underneath the soloist. And same kind of thing, happened in Duke Ellington's band, although it was arranged for the most part. But Gerry Mulligan loved moving lines. And I think he loved the freedom of not having anybody else dictate the harmony except a bass, the rhythm dictated by the drums, and he and other improvisers that he would hire were responsible for all of the rest of the harmony. He hired improvisers that were kind of like him. Lee Konitz, Chet Baker, Bob Brookmeyer, Stan Getz, Paul Desmond, the list goes on and on. Art Farmer, all improvisers, in my opinion, that are lyrical, that know how to leave space, that know how to bring the heat when they have to, that know how to listen, that know how to take over when it's their turn to take over, that know how to listen for motifs that the other player is bringing and capitalize on those, whether it's copying them, whether it's counterpointing them. But nobody was better at it than Gerry Mulligan. There's so many things I love about his small group playing. I just want to start listing them off for you. No matter how small the group, his arranging talents shine through. Most of the time, just the intros and the outros were the arranged parts. Sometimes there would be little shout sections or hits for the solos, but for the most part, they would play some beautifully arranged intro. Case in point. And then as they started to improvise, let's say Chet Baker, as Chet Baker started to improvise, Gerry Mulligan would weave this fantastic underlying just line of harmony, just hitting the third here, hitting the 7 here. But he does it in such a way that supports the soloist that I never even missed the piano player. It makes me wonder why I even play that guy back there. Like, why do we even need me ever? The way that he improvises is the thing that I am most blown away by, I suppose. It's the thing that I want to emulate the most myself. You know that I often preach about motifs and the importance of being able to find a really strong idea and then see it through and connect to your next idea. He's masterful at that. He's also a big fan of changing things up, of making things different one night to the next. Listen to this great quote by Wallace Roney talking about just this.
Roney described Mulligan as brilliant. I learned some very cool things about him, he said. My heroes were Miles Davis, John Coltrane, Red Garland, Herbie Hancock. These were my heroes, geniuses. I added Gerry Mulligan to this list because I saw him display his genius. I saw him take an arrangement, tear it apart, and redo it right there. He heard every part in his head. He would reorchestrate it, not just the notes, but the moving lines. This man can hear.
He was super creative in the way that he would arrange and even the way that he would put together his small group performances. Listen to this great recording of Jersey Bounce on the Chet Baker Reunion album, 1957, where he just decides he's going to trade ones with drummer Dave Bailey. Trading ones. We should do it more often. On the album Blues in Time with Paul Desmond, I think Gerry Mulligan had really made a kindred spirit kind of friend in Paul Desmond, because like I said, he's a lyrical player. Everybody loves the way he sounds, right? He's not afraid to leave space. He's not afraid to be a bit predictable. And in this kind of a situation where you have two horns playing together and no crutch like a guitar player or a piano player to take any kind of pressure off of you, really, you rely on each other, and you rely on the other person being able to latch on to what you're doing at the same time as he's thinking about what he's going to be doing next, and you're thinking about what you're going to be doing next, and you're thinking about what just came right before then. It's like constant motion. And I love this example right here of motifs that they heard each other play and picked up on. I found 25 different recordings that I would call duet recordings. Some of them have piano players on them, some of them don't. Of the 25 that I found, 14 have piano. So it's even a little higher than half. So he didn't always not play with pianists. And I think he was very careful in the pianists that he chose to play with. Really good at choosing piano players who, well, like he said, stayed out of his way. Jimmy Rolls was one of those early piano players who was great at just providing the kind of harmony and rhythm that Gerry Mulligan could still soar over. It's not to say that some of his duet partners were not pianists themselves. They were. In fact, I think maybe one of his greatest duet partners ever was the great Dave Brubeck. It's amazing to hear them play together. Another one of my very favorite recordings with a pianist is with the great Billy Taylor, live at the MCG in 1993 with Chip Jackson on bass and Carl Allen on drums. Listen to the way the two of them weave magically together on All the Things You Are. Toward the end of his career, he played with pianists more often. Ted Rosenthal, Bill Charlap were some of the last two to be involved in his groups. Listen to this recording, live in Japan, Bill Charlap. Another one of my favorite duet partners of Mulligan's was Stan Getz. In 1957, they recorded Getz meets Mulligan. Listen to Too Close for Comfort. I mean, you think that both of these guys are so mellow on their instruments, right? Like you can hear their breath and they leave all this space, but sometimes they get mean. And I love that about the way that Gerry Mulligan could use his instrument. He really, really gets mean here on this mean part of Too Close for Comfort. Whether it was in his big band writing or his small group writing, in his improvisation, in his arranging, he always found a way to weave melodies together, to have some kind of melodic understructure. Even as you listen to The Birth of the Cool, sometimes I want to sing those underlying melodies even more than I want to sing the real melody that's on top. And I know I'm not focused on his large groups, but please dive in and listen to everything you can by Gerry Mulligan, because all of it will help you as a musician to grow in your own musicianship. Mulligan won a Grammy for Best Jazz Instrumental Performance for his album Walk on the Water with his orchestra. This particular group only made one album, and there's a great live recording of Gerry playing soprano at the North Sea Jazz Festival with this group. And no matter what kind of a recording he was playing on, somehow he always found a way to slip his beautiful arranging skills into the recordings. I love to hear him supporting singer Jane Dubach on the 1993 recording, Paraiso Jazz Brazil. Thank you so much for hanging out and learning more about Gerry Mulligan with me. He's definitely one of my heroes. He might be the greatest improviser to ever live. He might be the best baritone saxophone player to ever walk the planet. He might be the best arranger, one of the best composers. Heck of a nice guy by all accounts. And I'm so glad that we've got such a body of work to listen to. So many great recordings and in so many different settings. If you'd like to see the full cut of this video, you can do that on my streaming service, Nebula. You can use the link that you see on the screen right here and sign up. It's $30 a year. That's a big discount that you get just with my code. Sometimes I do that. I'll have a shorter cut of my video on YouTube and an extended cut on Nebula. You can also see bonus videos that I've only put on Nebula. If you click the code, get yourself a subscription. It's a great platform. You can watch it on your Roku TV, your Android TV, your Fire Stick, watch it on your laptop, watch it on your phone. It's all educational content, and you can see a lot of other great music creators that you already know from YouTube that are on Nebula as well. This formula that I've written on the whiteboard, it's about half steps and it's about whole steps, and there's a pattern. Try it. Put your finger on any note. Actually, you should try all 12 of them. It's fun. It's like the most fun. Thanks everybody for watching, and I'll see you next time on Amy Nolte Music.